Welcome to Talk to Brazil with Tom Reaoch, the business connector to business in Brazil. Welcome to Talk to Brazil, the Business Connection, a leading business podcast talking about business in the world. I'm Tom Reaoch, an American from Pittsburgh, living in Brazil and known as the King of Networking, talking from my podcast studio in Campinas, São Paulo, Brazil. Today's guest is Bruno Santos, and he's joining us from Hortolandia in the state of São Paulo. Bruno and I met at the Inova Trade show in Campinas in 2019. Bruno is passionate about learning new technologies, applying innovation, optimizing processes, and being part of a bigger purpose, impacting people's lives. He has been working with customer service, digital product management, and business strategy. Bruno lived and studied in Australia. Bruno, when you went to Australia without family, friends, or sponsors, what did you learn about networking and being employable?
Great. So first things first, very good morning. Thanks for having me. And well, I had to learn English as fast as I could. So when I was in Brazil, I did study for a while and I learned English, or learned a bit of English translating TV shows. So I was creating subtitles. But when I went to Australia, I saw, okay, with this English, I couldn't speak at the airport. I would just show my passport and say, hey, my final destination is Brisbane. So where should I go? But when I arrived, I had to learn as fast as I could. I had to talk to people, and from the cashier at the supermarket to the fellow students at school, I had to go to job interviews, and I didn't know how that would work. So my first job was a referral from another colleague that I had met in another job interview. So that's why when I understood how good and how needed was to create these connections.
Well, you that's networking during interviews, huh?
Exactly. So I used to see someone would say competitor,
Right.
because sometimes it's a competitor, but I would try to get to know that person, especially outside when I knew no one actually.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, "Oh, where are you from?" Or what did you do in Australia? Where do you live? What are your goals? And from that moment, I would try to connect with the person and know where the person was from and get the contacts. Because outside, especially for international students, sometimes it might be very hard to get a new job or to maintain yourself outside. Right. And as you said, having no friends, no sponsors, no family, I had to connect with people.
So it's literally sink or swim, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So I'll try to do follow my objectives, right. Follow my goals, but also know how to follow what's going on and what's going well with other people that I've met.
I think that's the secret of success of relationship building. And I've learned that. And I want to go back to the word that you use, competitor. What I like to use, I consider everybody I meet not as a competitor, but as an ally.
Exactly.
And if you look at them as an ally, and even if they're competing for the same job interview that you're at, they're an ally. And if these persons, like you saw, they share information with you or share information about another job opportunity or another client or another whatever, that's priceless. But if you look at people as competitors, if you look at another company as a competitor, you never learn. And we need to learn from each other. And what you went to do in Australia, I guess, was to learn. So anything that you pick up, that's part of the process.
Exactly. The funny thing is, none of us got the job in that interview when we met. So we didn't get the job, but we helped each other like later on. So that was a very, very nice experience.
Well, I equate that when I was in the business world. I used to do that. Everybody celebrates the success. Everybody celebrates either the job that you got or the product you sold. And when I was in a commercial area, everybody would ring bells and say, we got another client. And everybody's happy. But I says, we need to analyze the others. Why didn't we get the others? And as they say today, fail fast. We do need it. And when you do fail, that's a learning experience in itself. And what you did, you corrected yourself, for whatever reason you weren't accepted. Many times we don't even know why, right?
Exactly.
Many job interviews don't tell you why. You just never talk to you again. So
it's a self-learning task. Mm-hmm. So from that, I always try to learn from my experience. So what did get wrong, or what should I have done better? Mm-hmm. And from that, I've been trying to learn from everything I do, and those connections made me experience and start to think how to analyze what I did and what I should have done better.
Good. Well, you learned. Well, if you're here today, you learned, and you've gone through Australia, which is not easy. Understanding Australian English is not easy.
No, it wasn't easy at all, because even for English speakers,
that's what I'm
some
saying.
people say the Australian accent. Yeah, the Australian accent is not the easiest at all. So I got used it. I learned the Australian accent, but I also lived with different people there, and I worked with different people there. So I used to live with Colombians, with Europeans, and with Asians. Mm-hmm. And living and studying and working with these different people, I was learning a bit of a different accent and understanding different accents.
Right.
So I think that helped a lot my understanding.
Without a doubt, and I think you also, and what I learned from what I do in my podcasting, I literally talk to people all over the world, which is good. And part of that, we talk in English and we can understand each other speaking English. But I think really the importance that comes from all of that and what you saw is understanding cultures. Because many times we think, well, if I speak the language, I understand the culture. That's not true. No. And in today's world, everything is English. English is the most popular language from a business standpoint. But what we need to do besides understanding the language is understanding the culture of the persons using that. And that's what global companies are about. And that's what the world's about. And even more forcefully now because of the pandemic, everything's become remote. Everybody's looking out to the world, looking for customers, looking for clients, looking for partnerships, looking for anything. But part of that looking, if you don't understand the culture, it doesn't matter whether you speak the language or not.
100%. And while in Australia, I got to visit some co-workers' place, co-workers who already lived in Australia for a long time, but not Australian native. Mm-hmm. And the language wasn't the only connection. So for some of them, I had to take off my shoes to understand the culture, mm-hmm. and to not shake hands, but just say a hi, mm-hmm. from a very far space, or maybe a bigger space than you have in Brazil.
Right.
So I had to learn all these different cultures and how to manage them and how to understand people and say, okay, it's not wrong because it's not the way I know. Mm-hmm. It's just the other way.
Right. And I think that's important, because I found that here in Brazil, because some of what I do is attracting foreigners and business investors to Brazil. And many of them, as you mentioned, they're surprised when they see how physical Brazilians are. Here it's everybody's hugging each other, kissing everything. Pre-pandemic, right? Pre-pandemic, everybody was kissing and hugging, and everybody saying, "Well, this is my friend. You know, I just met you 10 minutes ago, but now you're my friend Bruno." And you know, and sometimes persons couldn't understand that. So I just met you. Why are you calling me your friend? And why are you hugging me and kissing me? And you know, but and that's it. And many times we have to help people understand even before they come or when you go, as you mentioned. Study a little bit about that culture. And even if that going today is a remote process,
Yes.
and understand how people need to be reacted to. Because obviously if we're in a global group call, you may not see people taking off their shoes, but you have to use other communication to help people understand that you understand.
For sure, Tom. And other thing is, in Australia, it was a shock for me because there's no time for wordy people. So you must be very, very straightforward and go straight to the point. And here in Brazil, sometimes we go around and we are more wordy. and also, I understand that some positions, for example, in commercial team and sales, sometimes you have to be more wordy.
Right.
But in Australia, you got to be straightforward. Okay, it's not. Okay, it's not. You don't have to explain yourself a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But that was another shock, not for me, but for a lot of other people.
Well, I found that because obviously, I mean, as an American, I consider myself more objective and maybe less wordy. I think I become more wordy here, but that's an interesting point. Many people think, well, if you're not wordy, you're cold. So they understand that, and the other side say, well, Americans are all cold; they're not receptive. No, they're objective. Northern Europeans, as you said, the Australians, they're objective. And time is money. We say time is money, and time certainly is money. And they don't want to look at everything as a price tag, but that's part of the culture. Time is of essence. And today we say we shouldn't waste anything, right? We're talking about ecology. We're talking about sustainability. We should also not waste time because we can't get time back. You can't recycle time. Time is the minute we have.
We hardly can buy time.
Can't buy it.
We can't.
So that's of essence, and I think that's one of the secrets of communication. How can you get across, or how can you understand or be understood in the shortest period of time? I think that's ecologically correct.
100%, Tom.
So how did that all impact you? So now you're a professional. Because I want to remind our audience when we met. This is an interesting story because we met in an exhibition, right? It was a trade show. And what I did and what I do when I go into these trade shows, I walk around and meet people at the different stands. You were in a stand. And what I do really to be objective as I am, I give people 1 minute to tell me whatever they want to say. And I come up to people as I came up to you, as Bruno, and you're ready to make your pitch about the company you were with. And I says, well, you have 1 minute to tell me. And you took that minute and told me. Many people that I use that as an example, they stop breathing. They use that minute to recover, and they don't tell me anything. And then I move on to the next. So communication is also being, and you were that, and I think maybe you learned that because of Australia.
100%, Tom. So when we met back 2019 in this exhibition for startups, I had just started in this startup, an AI, artificial intelligence startup, and they said, "Bruno, do you want to go to this exhibition in our stand to present our products and our company?" And I say, "Yes, of course." And then when we met, so I used to say that I didn't get this communication, this explanation skill back in a few years ago, but living in Australia, when I had to go to places, to speak up for myself, to ask people for a job or for opportunity or for something else. And I started also working there in hospitality. I discovered this part of myself of talking to people and communicating and understanding the other person needs. And when I come back to Brazil and I start working in a startup and the sales and marketing team, I say, okay, maybe that's a path. That's something that I might like. And then we found each other.
Well, that's all customer experience. That's
all
customer experience is very quickly picking up on details of whatever your customer is saying. Many salespeople don't listen to the customer. They keep telling the customer, but they don't listen.
Exactly.
And that's part of what I consider the secret to success is listening.
100%. And if you're just trying to push what you think the customer wants, you're not get the customer, or maybe you get and then it's a turnover. But when you try to listen, try to understand and see what they want and what they need, especially, and then might be a success.
Well, I think that's good. And your story is because what you said, you started up in a startup. And it may sound redundant, but what you did when you went to Australia, you started up. You were your own startup in Australia.
Exactly.
So when you understand how you start up anything, a person or a company, then you apply that and what you're doing. And that's really your success. So if it's company A, B, or C, for you it doesn't matter. You dominate the process. And as I said, what you do, you study processes, right? You optimize processes. And communication's a process. Starting up a company is a process. So
sure, and
as much as you can optimize anything, that's success.
Yeah, and in Australia I was studying project management. So at the same time that I was studying English and project management, I was managing my life as I am my own product, I am my own company, and I have to get to places in here.
And pay the bills.
Yeah, and pay the bills especially.
No, but that's something. Well, I know because you've said that, and we talked before, you had an interesting experience. Now, to our listeners, many people are out there, and they have the fear of going. Obviously, today with the pandemic, traveling has changed. But that doesn't mean you can't connect remotely. What are your suggestions to today's youth? Someone today who's 16, 17 years old and is trying to, what am I going to be or what do I want to do? What tips do you give younger people today?
Great. I'll just say, if you fear, just go. But of course, not go without a planning. So I always plan everything I do. But I do my research, I talk to people. So before I go to Australia, I talk to some other students from my uni that had the international experience. I used to read blogs of traveling agencies, so to see what the country looks like and how's the culture and which schools are the best ones, which are not. And what's your main goal? So my main goal going to Australia was to learn English, get an international experience, and come back to Brazil or to another country and use that, and especially meet people in different cultures. So when you set a goal, so why you are going, not just go for having no reason. Sometimes it's okay having no reason, so just a sabbatical year. But for me, is study, plan, and just go. So I met people there. I met people that was studying, and some 50 years old, others had 20 years old. So the range is very large.
Right.
So everyone is trying to follow their dreams or their goals.
Or have new dreams. You mentioned someone who's
Exactly.
50. And we talked today, There's gender discrimination. There's all kinds of discrimination. Unfortunately, in the world, there's age discrimination.
Exactly.
And people don't know how to react. And so many older people like me are still learning, still trying to be valuable. And that's back to what you learned. You need to learn and learn from a number of different types of people.
100%, Tom.
So what's your future look like?
Well,
as you're planning, you say you have your checklist,
yeah.
And from what you said, you went to Australia with a checklist, and you checked all of the boxes.
Yes, I did. Well, for that, my next steps now I work in digital products. Mm-hmm. So that's where I found myself at the moment. Mm-hmm. So I really like to connect design, business, and with the product parts, mm-hmm. and understanding the customer and translating what the customer wants and needs to functionality or capability. Mm-hmm. But I see myself in Brazil or in another country working in a global position, mm-hmm. and a global company, maybe managing a country or a full area in a continent and solving global problems.
Right. Well, if we see today, to be honest, companies are going to Mars. So
exactly.
if we're looking for the globe, right, the globe has become secondary to some companies. Everybody's shooting for the stars, traveling outside. So the future has a whole lot of opportunities.
Yeah.
So do you think you want to get on a spaceship and go?
Why not? Why not? I think it would be interesting seeing Earth from space.
It would certainly be different, huh?
Yeah.
Well, that's good. Bruno, I want to thank you for sharing your time and your experience. It's been fun. And I know you do serve as a model for others, because the one thing you have overcome in doing it the way you did is a very simple word that most people have. It's called fear. And when we fear something, we don't do it because we're afraid. And you never once in anything that you say ever shown that you're afraid. You just went out and did. You planned, you researched what you said, and you did that. You even researched in the interview process with your allies. So that's the process that you created for yourself and followed. And I want to commend you for that.
Oh, thank you very much, Tom. And I believe in all of that I said. And when you said that I'm serving as a role model, that's also something that I always strive to be. And I want to be a mentor as well in the future. So
and why not in the present?
Exactly. Why not? That's a good question. Thanks.
Okay, Bruno. Well, thanks again. I want to thank again for sharing your time, and for our audience. The best place to find you is on LinkedIn, right?
Yes, Tom. LinkedIn. Very, very simple. B-Santos.
Okay. So it's Bruno, B-R-U-N-O, last name Santos, S-A-N-T-O-S. Bruno Santos from Hortolandia, São Paulo, Brazil. Okay, Bruno.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, and goodbye. And I'd like to thank our audience and our sponsor, Focus MI Market Intelligence. Focus MI specializes in market research for the Brazilian agricultural market. More about them on their site, www.focusmi.com. All Talk to Brazil podcast shows can be found on major platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, Amazon, GeoSavin, YouTube, and many others. Remember, when you talk to Tom, you talk to Brazil and the world. Goodbye, and thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to Tom Reaoch on Talk to Brazil, the business connector to Brazil.